Tonight, a tornado outbreak raking the south.
Yeah, that's a tornado moving ground.
In Georgia, a twister spawned by the very same system behind this deadly tornado, killing 2 in Oklahoma yesterday.
Wow.
That danger hit Texas too. Near Houston, the town of Onalaska, struck by a tornado leaving 3 people dead and injuring 30 others. Meteorologists say the Onalaska tornado wasn't on the ground long, but when it was, it left behind an unmistakable trail of destruction, shredding trees, lifting homes off their foundations, and leaving hundreds left picking up the pieces.
I knew what that sound was.
Kip Robbins and his family rode out the storm inside their home.
As a dad, you're always in control. I wasn't in control anymore.
Tonight, the rush is on to clean up, with even more storms coming. Morgan Chesky, NBC.
Rivers of mud sweeping through villages in the west of Kenya. In their path, homes, marketplaces, a police station and schools. In West Pokot, days of heavy rains. Locals pull survivors from the debris left behind. Many areas are still waiting for official rescue teams to arrive.
We ran to the other side of the ridge, and that's when we saw the floodwaters. It came down in a big wave and destroyed this whole shopping center and carried away all the animals and 2 cars.
Most roads have been cut off and bridges washed away. Locals say they've had to carry flood victims to nearby health centers on their backs.
This used to be a big market, but now it looks like a river. There were many shops here. Before yesterday, this was a vibrant shopping centre, but everything is gone now. Everything has been swept away, and it's very distressing. The government and all relevant agencies need to come here, and as we speak, several people are still missing.
Kenya's Red Cross warns that once the floodwaters clear, other threats loom. They fear waterborne diseases and a possible increase in coronavirus infections. In November, Al Jazeera filmed Tamkel village in western Pokot. After days of torrential rain, flooding and landslides, entire families here were killed. Communities surrounded by floodwaters and isolated. Days later, families went out in search of their relatives' bodies. Many say it was the worst disaster that they'd seen in a lifetime. Researchers say warming oceans are causing unpredictable weather patterns in eastern Africa, and with more rain expected in the coming days, help may be slow coming to these villages, and the problems may not be over. Laura Burden-Manley, Al Jazeera.
It was a desperate attempt to stop this couple being swept away. Strangers leapt into a street in central Aden, fighting to pull them free of the current. It is rainy season in Yemen, but with neglected infrastructure, the water makes its own path through the city, turning roads into rivers. Many were caught out and had to be saved from their vehicles. These boys trying to cheer up a woman they rescued by singing to her. Compounding the trauma is that this also happened a month ago. Then the UN had to bulldoze thousands of tons of rubble and mud off the streets. Almost 5,000 families were displaced. The water also harbours an invisible danger. Yemen is battling a cholera outbreak, a disease spread through water. Some 400 kilometres north, in the capital Sana'a, residents are salvaging what they can from floods a week ago. Heavy winds and rain killed 7 people, injured dozens, and damaged 16 refugee camps in the neighbouring governorate of Marib.
The heavy rain destroyed everything. We weren't expecting it, and it came from the mountains and swept everything away without warning. The rain took our clothes, buses, everything in its path.
And yet, there is a potentially more ominous disaster on the horizon. Yemen has had just 1 case of coronavirus. The UN has warned it will be catastrophic if it catches hold here. Only half of Yemen's medical facilities are functional, the population is acutely malnourished, and about 80% or 24 million people need aid to survive. Multinational companies, including Tetra Pak and Unilever, are donating tens of thousands of virus testing kits to Yemen. The first shipment will arrive next week. A devastated health system and neglected infrastructure are symptoms of Yemen's 5-year civil war. Whether it will continue is under negotiation.
For the first time, benchmark U.S. oil prices have crashed into negative territory, meaning producers are now paying buyers to take it away. In a massive one-day drop, West Texas Intermediate fell from about $17.50 a barrel to below zero. It was trading at around $60 a barrel at the start of the year. Global demand has plummeted because of the coronavirus-related lockdowns and travel restrictions and fears over a lack of storage space. This is despite continuous attempts to counter the havoc in global energy markets. Well, earlier this month, Russia and Saudi Arabia agreed to an unprecedented cut in output of almost 10 million barrels a day to try to boost virus-hit markets.
We are back. It is 7:39 on this Friday morning with a search for solutions as scientists and lawmakers around the world race to stop the coronavirus pandemic. Savannah, you spent some time yesterday with someone who is stepping up to help in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Billionaire entrepreneur Bill Gates has his foundation and has donated more than $250 million to COVID-19 research. He's also throwing resources behind tests, treatments, and vaccines for the virus. We spoke at length yesterday about what the future looks like and his prediction of a pandemic years ago that he hoped would better prepare us for what we're now facing. You have made fighting infectious disease really your life's work, at least the second half of your life. And my first question is just where we are right now in terms of this pandemic, that famous saying, are we at the end of the beginning or at the beginning of the end?
I wish I could say that we're halfway through, but I don't think so. It takes time to make a vaccine. There's a lot about the disease we don't understand. We know that we can get out of this, but it's going to be a while before things go back to normal.
You famously talked about a coming pandemic, this nightmare scenario back in 2015 on the heels of the Ebola crisis. And you said in your TED Talk that you worried about a virus that could be 1,000 times worse.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
Is this that virus?
Yes, the human-to-human respiratory spread is the scariest scenario. It's a nightmare. I wish it had come, 5 or 10 years later. Then governments might have done the preparation to move quickly like a few governments did, and the technologies would have been further along.
Let's talk about what's happening right now. There are states like Georgia poised to reopen some parts of their economy. What's your thought on the wisdom of that? Is there anywhere in the country that's ready for that kind of reopening?
We know that if you go fully back to normal mixing, that then you get onto that exponential growth curve. I am afraid we'll have some people and some states that move too quickly and have to back off.
Dr. Fauci said he's certain there will be a second wave of this virus. What's your perspective on how bad it could be?
If we're still being careful about social contact, if we've got the testing capacity up, I'm hopeful that the fall will not be nearly as bad as this first peak. The flu is a challenge because the symptoms are common enough that knowing exactly who to test, which are people with symptoms, will be a little confused because of all those flu infections.
The Gates Foundation is very much at the forefront on this hunt for a vaccine. We've all learned by now the timeline, the hopeful timeline of 12 to 18 months. That is a highly expedited track, a fast track for a vaccine. Can you explain why?
Well, usually a vaccine takes over 5 years because you have many steps that you want to do in a serial way. Here, because of all the incredibly negative effects, the sooner the better. There are 100 efforts, but maybe 10 of those should get the resources to build factories and go full speed ahead. So the best scientists working hard on this, and I'm hopeful. In fact, in the last few weeks, I've seen signs that we may get to the optimistic side of that time projection.
This is a landmark collaboration to accelerate the development, production, and equitable distribution of vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics for COVID-19. Our shared commitment is to ensure all people have access to all the tools to defeat COVID-19. The ACT Accelerator brings together the combined power of several organizations to work with speed.
The UN warns that the coronavirus outbreak could trigger another global disaster, a hunger pandemic of biblical proportions. The situation is already dire. Some 135 million people are facing crisis levels of hunger, and the UN says that that number could double because of COVID-19. We spoke to Hilal Elva, the UN Special Reporter on the right to food. She told us more about the unfolding food catastrophe.
Well, the world was not prepared, first of all, such a global pandemic to combat health emergency that's serious, let alone food emergency. Of course, some countries that are major staple food exporters like US, Russia, and China have significant stocks, but not net food importers. Countries have such a comfortable position. That's going to be the serious for some countries. Not all. As of now, as of end of 2019, 135 million people are severely food insecure in basically 30 countries. But the COVID will make this at least double. We don't know. Maybe it will not, or maybe even more. So we are in the uncharted territory yet. Well, actually, pandemic came in a time that there was no supply problem. There was no food supply problem. I mean, there was no significant food inavailability. We have enough availability issue, but pandemic broke the global supply chain because of lockdown and mobility restrictions. Today, we are mostly relying on global supply chain, and almost all countries are depending on import some food. Or even inside of the country, food systems are dependent on transportation from farm to table. When this chain broke, that prices go up, products cannot reach the market, etc., and major food insecurity starts gradually being serious.
Non saprò mai come sono andati gli ultimi giorni, quindi se ha sofferto, se si è resa conto della situazione.
We will have a lot of post-traumatic stress. It is an emergency.
People on their own in the house, it's a disaster.
It's like staying in prison. It's so hard.
Mia nonna aveva 96 anni, quindi lei ha contratto il virus tramite i miei genitori. Lei ci ha detto: non mi lascerete andare all'ospedale da sola. Ho provato a spiegarle la situazione, però non sono così sicura che lei avesse poi capito fino alla fine.
Simona is haunted by her grandmother's final days, not knowing how she died or if she was afraid.
Continuo a farmi un po' di domande, no? Se avessi fatto diversamente, se avessimo chiamato il 118 il giorno prima, se comunque i miei genitori al primo segno di raffreddore si fossero comunque isolati.
So many lives here have been touched by a sudden and tragic loss, but the psychological scars spread far further, scars of isolation, of fear, and it's leaving this support centre overwhelmed.
People, they don't know what to do, they don't know who to talk with, so they call us. Buonasera, sono Antonio, il supporto psicologico. Some people call because they say, I want to suicide. because the life is not so good anymore.
They've had to massively scale up this service. They're now taking calls 24 hours a day from people all across Italy who psychologically are really struggling.
Proprio perché la situazione è sconosciuta. Some of them are very hungry, very, very hungry. Some people call shouting, screaming, and...
You see me?
Yeah.
I scream sometimes. Sometimes I go crazy with my head.
For Luca, who's a student, this 7-week lockdown has become unbearable.
It's so difficult to stay at home all the day long. When you live in a flat and you don't have a green space.
What was your reaction when they extended the lockdown this last time?
I got crazy with my parents, with my friends by video chat. I say to them, really, we have to stay more time at home.
They say I feel like a prisoner, I'm at home. The other people say I'm frightened to go outside because I'm afraid that the virus is in the air, that I can contact it.
This isn't a country that talks a lot about mental health. There's no national system in place to help people, and psychologists say it's not equipped to treat the crisis that's emerging.
For sure we were unprepared. We don't have enough psychology in the system, so in this kind of moment we need like a real public system to meet the demand for this kind of emergency.
The most important situation right now is mental.
These food bank volunteers aren't trained for this. Their grocery deliveries have become doorstep counselling sessions.
They need to talk with somebody, they need to smile with somebody. Salve signora, buongiorno. That's our most important job, to give a smile.
Mi passa la giornata, mi passa. È la notte che non passa, che dormo poco e allora ecco che la mente lavora.
Vivo da sola perché non ho più mio marito. Ho 2 figli sposati che io non li vedo da 2 mesi e non so come fare, non vedo nessuno. La sera e prima di andare a dormire mi auguro sempre che il giorno dopo sia meglio, però è triste.
What started as a health emergency is morphing into a psychological one, but the true spread of the trauma is not visible yet.
Mai mi sarei aspettata che avrei dovuto perderla in questo modo, quindi senza neanche salutarla, senza neanche fare un rito funebre. È una situazione che sicuramente ti cambia e ti lascia il segno.
Some people say this is not life anymore. They cannot see the end of this.
Mi mancano i figli, mi manca la vita che facevo prima.
I want to be free. I want to be free.
It risks to become really a psychological emergency, not only in Italy, everywhere in Europe.
This is the first day of a Ramadan that is unlike any other, unlike anything that Muslims expected. This is a very difficult time, a Ramadan under lockdown.
With public gatherings banned during Ramadan, including communal prayers, speeches and so on, remember to continue your prayers and devotions in self-isolation.
You might think that Ramadan is an individual thing, that you could fast by yourself at home. But in fact, Ramadan it's a very social thing. There's a huge aspect of it that is community, that is social, that is your neighbors and your family. For example, families wake up together to pray in the morning, to eat before a very difficult day. At the end of that day, they get together with entire communities, entire towns, and they celebrate. They eat, they pray. This is, after a long and difficult, a hungry day, food at last. And people have been deprived of the social aspect for now. And there's also a whole host of things that Muslims stay away from. So for the duration of the fast, while the sun is up, people refrain from entertainment, various forms of entertainment. And on top of that, there's all the other challenges. There's the quarantine. There's millions of people who don't have enough money, who don't live in a country where the government can give them money to stay in self-isolation for a month. People are facing very difficult challenges.
We must accept Ramadan as a test sent to us by Allah. We lived and sometimes forgot about who gave us health, life, well-being and work. Today there is an opportunity to think, to look at the past and into the future.
Again, Muslims are a quarter of the world's population, and for the next month, many of them will be fasting. There's a whole host of medical arguments here to be made, whether some people should be exempt, others shouldn't, and they are. Religious leaders and leaders of Muslim nations are exempting nurses, for example, medical staff, doctors from the fast because they're working in incredibly stressful conditions, especially now. They're wearing full personal protection equipment. It is very difficult work. They have no room for error, no room to make mistakes, and they're being exempt from the fast.
If a doctor asks a person not to fast as it might affect his immunity, then the person has the right not to fast during Ramadan. Workers in the health sector also have the Islamic right to choose not to fast during their work days.
Obviously, Muslims around the world have voiced that they will abide by one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the month of Ramadan. But this is going to be a very different and a very difficult month for many.
What was once a warning is now everyday life, everyday brutal life for tens, hundreds of millions of people around the world.
I lost everything.
The question is, can we act fast enough? That's why this need for urgency. That's why there are people in the streets.
Activists gathered for the first Earth Day 50 years ago this month. In those 5 decades, we haven't made as much progress on protecting the environment as you might think. The state of the planet is actually far more dire today than it was back then. Yet we barely notice some of these slow-moving and massive shifts.
House just crumbled in.
A whole town was wiped off the face of the earth.
Yes, to be fair, there have been big wins since that April in 1970. The skies over LA are cleaner now, thanks to the Clean Air Act. American rivers generally don't catch on fire like this one did before the Clean Water Act. Acid rain and DDT, they mostly live in the past, especially in the developed world. And remember the ozone hole? Well, thanks to international cooperation and regulation, it's recovering. Yet there are 4 key areas in which we're actually worse off today.
Preventing irreversible climate disruption, it is a race we can and must win.
The most important example, the climate crisis. Burning coal, oil, and natural gas, that sent carbon dioxide levels through the roof, raising global temperatures to dangerous heights. We're seeing the disastrous effects of the climate crisis now.
I just can't believe it. It really looks like a war zone.
In the United States, the western wildfire season is now months longer than it was in the 1970s. Sea levels have risen about 4 inches in the last 50 years, and they're now threatening coastal cities and causing coastal flooding worldwide. We're putting plenty of other species in jeopardy too, to the point that many experts say the Earth is entering its 6th mass extinction event, the first caused by humans.
So as you open it up, you can see all that plastic that's inside this bird.
We've already wiped out more than half, 60%, of all the world's vertebrate animal populations since 1970. Climate change, poaching, and agriculture are mostly to blame. Humans have covered nearly 40% of the Earth's land surface with pasture and farms. All of that puts forests at great risk too. About a fifth of the Amazon rainforest has vanished in the last 50 years. These forests matter for many reasons.
It is Earth Day, after all, today, and like everything else, that means something slightly different during a pandemic. Climatologists are calling the massive drop-off in emissions since society slowed down one big experiment, a chance to see a world without us humans playing such a prominent part. The question, what lessons can we learn? Our Clayton Sandell reports.
The 50th anniversary of Earth Day lands in the middle of a global pandemic, giving humans a glimpse of what the planet might look like if we took better care of it. Take air quality. With fewer people on the roads, skies over New Delhi this week turned from hazy brown to a rare blue. In Paris, where satellite pictures show empty streets around the Arc de Triomphe, air pollution is down 46%, 19% in Sydney, 29% in LA. In San Francisco, where more people are walking and riding bikes, the city is shutting down 13 miles worth of streets, giving more room to social distance.
I think it's good because then I could ride my bike all over the streets.
Airlines are suffering from empty planes and airports, but climate scientists say lower emissions, thanks to a 70% drop in global flights, might have an upside.
One passenger, one way from New York to LA has the equivalent of melting 30 square feet of sea ice.
Thanks to coronavirus shutdowns that have devastated the economy, environmental changes are now happening at an unprecedented rate.
We're all part of a big experiment here. I don't think we've ever seen such an abrupt and simultaneous drop in our emissions. These are crazy times, but for the Earth, it's maybe a breath of fresh air.
For animals, like this kangaroo in Australia, it's a time to reclaim near-empty city streets. There was the goat jam in the UK, lions sunning themselves on a South Africa road, big cats jumping walls in Chile, boars in Israel, and coyotes in San Francisco. Yosemite National Park had 4 million visitors last year. Today, 0.
What are the animals doing since the park has been closed? For the most part, I think they're having a party. I think that this time of year is difficult for the animals here. There can be literally walls of cars or people in the park.
There are things scientists say the pandemic likely won't change, like global warming. The level of carbon dioxide humans are pumping into the atmosphere may be slowing, but overall, it's still rising.
We've been altering our atmosphere in significant ways since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Things started going up in the early 1800s. So 6 months change in emissions is not going to have a huge effect.
Environmental advocates say the shutdown hasn't slowed Trump administration rollbacks in the past few weeks, delaying Obama-era vehicle mileage standards and rolling back coal power plant emission standards. As quarantines end and Americans shift out of park in the coming months, plummeting gas prices may give them motivation to drive even more than before.
In the long term, we end up with more air pollution and, in fact, more fossil fuel emissions because there's this desire to sort of get back to business as usual. So in the long term, is this going to save lives or harm lives? I think it remains to be seen.
But what's happening now, scientists say, provides a glimpse into a sort of parallel universe where the possibilities of alternative energy, lower emissions, and less pollution can be seen right now, if only for a short time.
Great time to take stock of how our daily impact, or how our daily lives and our actions really do impact the environment we live in. We're all in this together, and we all share the same nest. And I think that's one thing this pandemic may be showing us, is that our actions do affect one another.
Oggi celebriamo la 50ª giornata mondiale della Terra. È un'opportunità per rinnovare il nostro impegno ad amare la nostra casa comune e prenderci cura di essa e dei membri più deboli della nostra famiglia. Come la tragica pandemia di coronavirus ci sta dimostrando, soltanto insieme e facendoci carico dei più fragili possiamo vincere le sfide globali. Risvegliamo il senso estetico e contemplativo che Dio ha posto in noi. La profezia della contemplazione è qualcosa che apprendiamo soprattutto dai popoli originari, i quali ci insegnano che non possiamo curare la terra se non la amiamo e non la rispettiamo. Loro hanno quella saggezza del buon vivere, non nel senso di passarla bene, no, di vivere in armonia con la terra. Loro chiamano il buon vivere questa armonia. In questo tempo pasquale di rinnovamento, impegniamoci ad amare ed apprezzare il magnifico dono della terra, nostra casa comune, e a prenderci cura di tutti i membri della famiglia umana. Come fratelli e sorelle che siamo, supplichiamo insieme il nostro Padre Celeste: manda il tuo Spirito e rinnova la faccia della terra.